Hi everyone, it's Bobby from Dig Coding here, and in this video I'm going to show you how to create a Python SDK. Now this SDK will facilitate the use of the Hedera Mirror Node API. So without further ado, let's jump straight into it. Okay, so you'll be pleased to know I've written a tutorial that we'll be following along with in this video. You can find that on my website, so the link to this is in the description below. If you don't like watching videos, then by all means visit my website and follow along in your own time. But like I say, we'll be going through that tutorial now. So what is an SDK? Well, it means Software Developer Kit. Now these kits allow us to work with APIs in a clear, concise and scalable manner. Now an author of an API will generally, well, not always, but generally they'll create SDKs to help developers out, especially in popular languages such as Python and Java. So I have written a Python SDK for the Hedera Mirror Node API as they didn't have one. The reason they didn't have one is because the API is quite simple. You don't necessarily need one. You can just use Postman because I'm not using API keys or secrets or anything like that. But if you are subscribed to my channel, you'll know that I'm going to be creating a lot of Hedera-based content over the next year or so. So I've got the SDK for my own benefit more than anything else, but it's publicly available and you can clone it down or pip install it into your own project, and it'll allow you to query the Mirror Node, which is a place where all transactions on mainnet, testnet and previewnet are stored. So it's quite handy actually. So building the SDK enabled me to create this video and tutorial to help you create an SDK for your own API project. So let's jump straight into it. So like I say, in this tutorial, I'll show you how to create an SDK that will facilitate the usage of the Hedera Mirror Node API. So Hedera is a third generation public ledger. So what differentiates them from other public ledgers is that they are extremely fast, 10 times faster than blockchain alternatives. They are cheap, so always predictable gas fees. And lastly, more importantly, I would say, is that they are carbon negative. So they're really, really green. So the Mirror Node, like I said a moment ago, let me scroll to the top here. Sorry, I was tinkering earlier. So the Mirror Node stores a history of transactions that have occurred on mainnet, testnet, and previewnet. So you can imagine it's quite handy when you're trying to query some data that has, or some transactions that have occurred on Hedera. So these are all of the endpoints on the right hand side here that we will be, that I've already added to the SDK, but we'll be focusing this tutorial just on this one here. So it's the accounts endpoint. So we'll be just querying accounts. So back to the tutorial. So I'll read this anyway, but I've just spoken about Hedera. So Hedera is the most used enterprise-grade public network for you to make your digital world exactly as it should be, yours. Now, HBAR is the native, energy-efficient cryptocurrency of Hedera that powers the decentralized economy. Whether you're a startup or enterprise, a creator or customer, Hedera goes beyond blockchain for developers to create the next era of fast, fair, and secure applications. So that's Hedera. Let's continue down on this page. This video here is the one I'm recording right now. So if you are reading along with the tutorial, click that and it'll take you through to the video. So the SDK can be found on GitHub. A link is on the page here. This is the GitHub repository. Now you can clone this down in any which way you see fit. You've got HTTPS, SSH and GitHub CLI options here. You can also clone it down as a zip file if you want it in your project. Okay, so this is the project. It says here that I've added it to PyPI, which is a Python package manager. This allows you to use the command pip install. So if you have a virtual environment in your project, pip install Hedera Mirror SDK, you're good to go. So let's look at the README file here. I'll show you how it works in a second because I've already got it fired up on my Visual Studio Code. So you import client from the REST file here. Client is just a class that we'll be building. You create a client variable by passing through a few keyword arguments, and then you can essentially just make calls. Go ahead and make calls. You can see here client.account.get will query the account endpoint. You can see here if you then get the key status, it should say 200 if it's a success, and if you then call a JSON keyword, it will then show you the JSON response from the actual call itself. So let's go ahead and test this. I've already got it in my Visual Studio Code. So all we need to now do is make the call. Visual Studio Code. So accounts variable equals client.account.get. That's it. In the background, that's now created a URL that will look something like this. So https testnet.mirrornode.hedera.com/API/v1/accounts. That is the URL that we've created using the SDK. It's made the call, it's got the request, the response. There we go. So now we can go accounts and go status. We should expect something that says 200, and then accounts JSON. Actually, before I do that, let's make another one. Let's go token equals client dot token dot get token, which is just another endpoint status. And if we now go accounts JSON, that's the JSON response. And if we then go token, I think it was token rather than tokens. There we go. And that's the JSON response for the token endpoint. So the SDK does work. If you use it and you find any issues, then by all means give me a shout and I'll make the necessary changes. It's very, very new. So there could be a few typos, but like I say, I built this for my own benefit really. But if anyone out there has a use for it, then go ahead and have a tinker. Okay, cool. So let's jump straight into this now. So the syllabus is a pretty small one. Okay, we're going to create a project, set up an environment in one hit. Then we'll write some code. So we'll create the REST file with the client class and the domain, and then we'll go ahead and we'll test it. So it's nice and easy, won't take too long, 10 minutes I would have said. And then at the end of it, you'll have a very, very basic SDK that you can then go about and flesh out. So we're making a single endpoint call in this SDK, but you can flesh it out and you can make all of the different endpoints and tweak it accordingly to meet your own requirements. So we need to set up an environment. Let's get started. So open up a text editor of choice. I use a Visual Studio Code, as you know, but we're going to create this. We're going to call it, it says Hedera Mirror SDK. I've just changed that actually. It's actually, if I update the page, there we go. It's did SDK. I realized this a few moments ago. So we're going to call it did SDK. We're going to create a directory CD into it. So let's open up this. We can scrap that, open a new terminal. Make the IR, we're going to call this did SDK and CD into did SDK. Okay, let's close it down. We've just created this and go back in the tutorial. Create a virtual environment. We'll call it VENV just for this tutorial. You can call it whatever you like. I'll take a second. I'll just create all of that. Now, if you're using Windows, you'll use this command. If you're using Unix and Mac, then you'll use this command here. And what that'll do, that'll fire up your virtual environment. Virtual environment allows us to install packages just into a little bubble rather than install it across your entire machine, which we don't want to do. Okay, fire that up. The fact we've got VNV in brackets there means that it's actually worked. And what we now want to do is pip install request. So request is a Python library. It's really, really helpful. It's designed to make calls and get responses back from APIs. It's really, really powerful package. I use it in most of my projects. So we will pip install requests. Oh, we'll just do it. Pip install requests. I'll go ahead and do what it needs to do. Let's see, let's clear that. And then we'll go pip freeze requirements.txt. It's good practice. Whenever you pip install a package, then just use the pip freeze command and push it to a requirements.txt file. That will create a file in your project called requirements.txt, and it'll have all of the different libraries that your project relies on to work. You can see, although we've only pip installed requests, it has a lot of dependencies, and we've got URL lib3, IDNA, and charset, and so on and so forth. So don't be alarmed that you're seeing a lot more packages than what we've actually installed, because that's just the dependencies of the packages you've installed. Cool. let's carry on. So that's it. That's the setup. That's the project. That's the requirements. Let's write some code. Okay, so whilst in the did SDK directory, we can make another one called REST. So in the demo I showed you a moment ago, you can remember that we imported the client class from the REST directory. Well, we're now creating that directory. Okay, and what we want to do is create a constructor or a dunder init file, which is required in a Python project. Okay, so in here now, in did SDK, we've now created this REST directory, and within that we've got an init.py. We'll have some echo is on, we don't need that. That's just because you used echo to create it. And we're going to be focusing on the account endpoint, so we also need to create a directory for account. So we'll go about and use these commands. Okay, so within REST, we've now got a directory called account, okay, with another init file. Again, you don't need echo, we can delete that, but it's not the end of the world. Keep clearing that because some of the code will sit behind my head on the video. Okay, so what have we got? I haven't mentioned it before, but if you like this video, then please subscribe and like it and add a comment, it's always helpful. So open the account /init.py in your text editor and add the following code. So let's just pick all of that up. Go into my account.init file, which is the one that's open here. So REST account init. Paste all of this code in it. Save. What this is an account class. Now, in a real use case, you would use inherency. For instance, in the SDK that I've created, this get method here, I've got that in an abstract class that this account class inherits from, but for the tutorial I just kept it as two files. So I mean, deconstruct this project or this tutorial in any way, which way you see fit, to make sure that you're not repeating yourself. So for this tutorial, however, I've just got get method that's situated directly in the account class. So we've got a dunder init method, so we're instantiating this class and we're passing through the self, which you always do, and we've got a few parameters here. So we call super on account itself, and then we're creating some variables here. So we've got class variables, instance variables, sorry. We've got self, did SDK, base URL, domain, and version. Okay, the reason we're passing all of these through is because the whole point of this SDK is we're trying to construct a URL. So when we're calling the account endpoint, we want the ability to throw in there the env, the version, parameters, and that's why we've got keyword arguments, by the way. So that's a catch-all and everything else. We want to throw everything, and it just like constructs this bespoke URL with filters and parameters that will actually make the call that we're expecting to do. So we've got some instance variables there, and then we've got a get method. Like I said previously, on a complex API SDK, you're going to have post methods, delete methods, and put methods. This is where you'd essentially put them to make them all work. And that's why you would have this as an abstract, because the get method will be used across all of the endpoints. So you'd create maybe an abstract in a mixin, and then you pass through get, which can be used on all of the different classes. So this get method is taking in params, so the parameters, that would be things like greater than or even. It will be things like filtering and searches. That's where we're passing from params. And they've got data, headers, auth. See, this is if you're passing through things like API keys. And then we've got profile ID, domain ID, and domain action. So don't worry about those too much. They are just the names of the variables that I'm using that allow me to construct the URL. It'll make a little bit more sense when we add the next bit of code into the REST ini file or init file. So I've just spoken about this, but what have we done here? The idea of this code is to initiate and handle GET requests made to the account endpoint. Most APIs will have GET post, put, delete methods. When this is the case, you would simply add this as extra methods. Now we want to add this code to the rest/init file. So let's go here and then save. Go back to the tutorial. Go down. Keep going. Keep going. Keep going. Here we go. So what have we just done here? So I'll go straight into Visual Studio Code and walk you through each of the methods and the classes, but I have put some text on the screen here that just kind of gives you an explanation of what we're doing in each of the classes and why it's important that we've got them. But what I like is this here. So this is the whole point of this SDK. We're creating this, or we're trying to create this. So we've got API, we've got V1, which is the version. You can imagine if we create a client that said V2, that would need to say V2. Accounts, that is the endpoint. So that's why we're creating the client for account. And then we've got a little question mark here. And this would be, in this instance, classed as a parameter. So this API is constructing all of this, and all we need to pass through is different keyword arguments into the class itself, to the call itself. Okay, so this is the REST init file. At the top here, we're doing some imports. We've got operating system, we've got JSON, which is important. We're using URL encode for this class, method, which is called create params. And then we're importing requests. So we've already imported requests is in our virtual environment. Okay, so this class here is a nifty little class. This method here is a nifty little method that I use in a lot of my projects, and it just encodes parameter strings. So it allows you to throw parameters, and it will create an encoded parameter string that can be appended to a URL. It's really, really helpful. So we'll be using that. I've got a class here called Path Builder, one called API Requester, one called Client. Path Builder. So used to build the correct API path that includes parameters and filters. Okay, so the dunder init method here takes in a whole bunch of keyword arguments. This is what we're passing through when we make the call. Okay, we've got a build method. This is called when we make the API requester. So pass. You can imagine if we're looking at different paths, so we're looking at accounts, we're looking at token in this instance, or NFTs, then we would add one of these domains another keyword key value pair to the domains dictionary. So at the minute we've got account, but if we were adding one for token, we would quite simply just add token here, and we'd change it to tokens. Okay, so that's how I'm managing to construct the endpoints. Okay, in this case, it's just for account. So this is paths. We're creating a domain info. So from paths, we're looking at domains, and we're looking at for self-domain. So this build method is being called when we call, I think it's the API requester. No, it isn't. It's client. 1 second. Let's see where we've got the build call. Here we go. It's build. So path builder is being called here, and we're saving a response to a path URL tuple. So we're passing through all of these keyword arguments, and then we are calling the build method. So that's how let me scroll up without losing you too much. This is what we're calling in client. Okay, so we've got this code here, and we're just extrapolating out all of the necessary bits and pieces from this dictionary called parse. We're creating a profile ID, domain info, then we're creating a path variable, which is a string, and when this is where we're connecting the URL with the parameters and the filters and searches, and then we're creating a URL based on path and the base URL. Okay, params, empty dictionary, operators. These are the operators that are found on the mainnet. So on here, so I've gone through all of the different endpoints. And on here, it's got loads of optional filtering. So I've just gone through the website and worked out what all of the different filtering keywords look like, and I've put them into this. Okay, so I've got different operators that we can call, and then these a few lines of code here is what's constructing the actual filter in the syntax that's required for the API, and then it just returns a path URL list. Okay. API requester, this is what's making the request to the API using the requests library. Okay, so we're passing through the method, in this case it's get, passing through the URL, which is this here, passing through the headers. We're not sending any headers in this API call, but if we were making a post request, then you'd need things like API keys, secrets, bearer tokens, things like that. So we're not, but it's good practice to have that in there. And then the data, if we're making a post request, you might be sending some JSON, and that's how you'd send it. So this is the get request in method, the get method for the request, and calling requests, get, passing through the URL, passing through the headers, in this case it's none, and getting a response. Okay, so, but this is where the magic happens really, is the client. This is what we're importing, this is what we're constructing, and then subsequently calling. Okay, so when we import client, we've got creating some instance variables. So we're passing through the version, passing through the env. This is when we constructed it. We said it was v1, it was testnet. And in a real world SDK, that you might actually have your API key and your secret in your environment variables on your machine. And we access that with os.environ in Python. So if we're not passing through a version in env, then we can actually use the environment variables instead. So that's what we're creating there. Base URLs, these are pulled directly from Hedera Mirror Node. So if we pass through env as mainnet, the base URL becomes this. Testnet, base URL becomes this, which is testnet mirror node, and then preview net. Okay, we've just got to try and accept here. So if we don't pass anything through as a base URL, then it comes through as an attribute error and exception. So we just raise an exception saying, look, if you're using mainnet, testnet, or preview net, we have to pass one of those through as the env. And then lastly, on here, we're just creating an instance variable self_account. Obviously, if you had one for token, you would just create self._token equals none, and we need that as none as we're making a call further on down the page. We've got the method called request. This is the method that we're calling when we make the request, which then calls API requester. Now, I won't go through each of these because it's kind of self-explanatory. You're always passing through the method, the base URL, the parameters, and so on and so forth to each of them. But what is important in this code that isn't in the Hedera Mirror SDK package is I've got all of these print statements. So when we test this in a few moments, yes, we'll be making a call to the account endpoint, but we'll be able to see the URL that we're calling, and we'll be able to see the JSON response, okay, which is quite important when you're testing. Okay, and then we're calling API requester, JSON response is here, and what it does, it returns status and JSON, okay? And lastly, we've got we're creating a property of this class called account, so we'll create one of these for each of the endpoints. Like I say, we're focusing just on account in this tutorial, so def account creates the method, and in this we've got if_account is none, which we know it is, then it makes this call. We import account, which we just created, right? So import from did sdk.rest.account, import account, which would be this one here. Self_account, so we're creating that variable. So account, when we're passing through self, base URL, account, and self Hedera mirror version, okay? And if you want to know what that is, it's right at the top here. There we go. So this is the instance variable that we've created further up in the client itself. And that's it. Let's go back to the page. So spend some time going through this page here, and it will explain a little bit about each of those. I hope I've done a bit of a deeper dive so you know exactly what we're doing. So we're in this stage now where we can actually test this to make sure that it works. So we can open up a new terminal, fire up a virtually env. So open up a Python interpreter, use the following code to create a client to access the API. Let's go ahead and do that. Don't want that. Terminal, new terminal, and that will open up in YouTube. So we'll cd into did SDK, and let's fire up the virtual environment. So what is that? That's the env /scripts /activate.bat. There we go. We've already got requirements there, so we can now do a Python interpreter open. We can probably just pick both of those up actually. Let me just go back in here. From did SDK written import. CD. Oh, let me just get this. There we go. Right, so the problem I had there is I CD'd into did SDK when you don't. If you looked at the command, what it's saying is from did SDK, when in actual fact we're already in there, so we don't need that. So we could have just said from rest. Instead, I've just CD'd into the previous directory and used that code. So we've created a client. So client equals client. We'll pass through version equals v1 and env equals testnet. So now we should let's follow. Let's not deviate from this. Let's do this. Client account.get, and with any luck, there we go. It worked. So if you scroll to the top here. So client.account.get, rather than saving this as a variable, we're just making the call. So the endpoint URL, this is the endpoint we've just created using the API, the SDK. We've called it, the status is 200, and the JSON response is this, okay? But now let's test some other bits and pieces. So I go, I'll just have to keep it at the bottom of the screen, otherwise I need to close down the interpreter, clear the screen, do it again and make all the calls. It just gets a little bit clunky. So let's go back here and make another call. Don't need to change client, call in account. And this time we're passing through profile ID. So one of the variables that we were passing through, or sorry, one of the keywords that we were passing through to the class was profile ID. This enables us to not get a list, but to specify what profile we want to return. So let's try that. Copy, back in here, dump that in. Right. Endpoint has changed. Okay, so this time is accounts / and we're passing through 0.0.25, and this is the response. Okay, we can change that to 6, and that will return the profile account for which it has an account ID of 0.0.26. Okay, next we can just test this one. So one of the operators, if you remember in here, was greater than or equals to. Let's try that. Copy, and I won't do the last one because you kind of get my drift, right? So this call is slightly different. Where is it? There we go. Right, is that it? No, it's this next one. So the endpoint is now different. So again, we're calling accounts, and then question mark, and we've got account ID equals greater than or equals to 0.0.60. Okay, so you can see here in the JSON response it's worked. So the lowest one is 0.0.60. There we go, we've got another one there, 6.1, and it goes up and up and up. Actually, do you know what? I will show you the last one just for, then you've got lower than or equals to. Go here, typical. Copy, go in here, and bang, there we go. So the call itself is there. There we go. So we've got testnet.mirrornode.hedera.com, and then you've got lower than or equals to. So spend some time going through the code. Essentially, if you sat down for 20 minutes and started going through each of the classes and how they talk to one another and the kind of the flow of information through this SDK, you will start to understand what I've tried to do and accomplish creating this SDK. Essentially, like I say, you don't need one. You can use Postman. You can make a request using the request library directly. And you know what I'm like with typing. I do typos all the time, so it's a bit of a pain for me. So having an SDK that allows me just to create a client and make a call on the fly, it's really, really good. And I can also integrate that into my project. So if I wanted to do some analysis on the testnet, previewnet, or mainnet about some transactions, specific transactions that have occurred, I can quickly do that programmatically, actually. So that is it. It worked. I'm really, really happy with that. Let me go back to my screen here. So it worked, right? It's always good when you get to an end of a video that's taken 20 minutes to create and nothing went wrong. So really, really happy with that. Spend some time going through the code. Like I say, I will repeat myself because if you're going to flesh it out, don't repeat yourself. So the get requests in the domain, create an abstract class, and then inherit that. That way you can just use the same class throughout your project. You can see I've tried to make it so that you can actually add other endpoints with ease, rather than just making a variable. I've created a dictionary that you can quickly add different endpoints to. So that's how I built it. I hope you liked this video. I enjoyed making it. It's the first coding video that I've put together for about 4 or 5 months, so it's a little bit clunky. I do apologise, but I'll be knocking out these videos more frequently in the coming weeks and months, so I get a little bit more slicker. Any comments, any feedback would be much appreciated, so please get in touch and let me know what you think. And I'll be seeing you in the next video. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.